Wake up with the sunrise, meditate to clear my mind. Thank you for this breath. I'm ready to be.
Hello and welcome to the Ray of Justice Healing Session. For today, I am your fearless hostess, Rachel W. Robinson, Esquire. Many of you know me as a victim rights attorney. I'm also a lyricist, poet, author, gardener, all those wonderful things about myself that I got to discover on my healing journey. And I invite you all to do the same. That is why I'm bringing these healing sessions to you. And today we're going to talk about healing from trauma, which is not an uncommon theme on these sessions, but this is going to be a really special one. Trauma comes with anger, fear, and confusion, together with negative beliefs that can prevent a survivor from moving forward. I have a great guest today who helps women remove mental and emotional roadblocks caused by trauma to move forward and live lives of freedom and peace. Sarah Senst is a licensed professional counselor. Her mission is to teach women how to face life's challenges and empower them to come out on the other side strong, confident, and bold. She has spent thousands of hours with women who are survivors of abuse, as well as parents who have children who are survivors of abuse and sexual assault. Sarah assures her clients that there is another side to the pain and shame, and it is her role to tap into their strengths, knowledge, and wisdom that her clients already possess so that they can courageously embark on their healing journey. I am so pleased to have her today. Sarah, thank you for coming. How are you?
Thank you. I'm great. Thank you for having me.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for being here. Let's jump right in. And just so everyone knows, trigger warning, we may be talking about some pretty sensitive issues, diving into traumas. And so if you are sensitive to that, or if you are newly out of some certain trauma, just make sure you have resources around and that you listen with an open mind, or maybe don't listen at all until you're in a different place. But with that, Sarah, welcome, and tell us your origin story. How did you get started in this field?
Yes. Thank you so much for having me. This was a later in life career for me. I made a career change at about 49 years old, went back and got my master's degree in counseling at 48, and just made a major pivot because I decided I really wanted to help people. I had had a very powerful experience myself in counseling and therapy, and got a lot of healing and growth through that. And I wanted to be able to do the same for others and with others. So I'm in private practice today, own my own business, and serve clients in individual therapy.
Amazing. Thank you. So, one of the things that I have seen you talk about a lot in other podcasts and other appearances is the guilt that women have when they go through trauma, and even as mothers, what mothers will feel when they're parenting or trying to learn to parent a child who's experienced trauma. What can you tell us about that?
Yes, it's so true. And it's very common for victims of all ages to feel guilt and shame after they've been through a traumatic situation like sexual abuse. And it's tragic, right? Because the victim has done nothing wrong, and yet they walk away carrying the burden of guilt and shame. So I do a lot of work around that and how to alleviate that and let that go. It just doesn't serve us well. There's no purpose for it. And I hate to say, but it happens to be more common for females than males also, unfortunately. So a lot of my work is around that.
And one of the sayings that you definitely have that I like, and I really lash on to, has to do with mothers who are trying to navigate their own trauma or their children's trauma. And you have this quote: guilt lies in the space between what you are capable of giving and what you believe is expected of you. I want to hear you talk about that in terms of victims' guilt and the parents who might be helping a child navigate that guilt. What brings that about?
Right. Those are such great questions, both of them. For a victim, what we're capable of, especially depending on how recent the trauma is, and for many years to come, possibly if it hasn't been processed, we're not necessarily capable of doing much more than what we're doing today. Yet society or family or whomever sort of sometimes has these expectations that we should be doing better. We shouldn't be as sad. We should be farther along in the process. And so guilt lies in that middle space of, I'm stuck. I'm where I am. I don't know what else to do. But then I see all these expectations that say I should be or be feeling something different. It's a very difficult place to be. So that is true for actual victims. And then for mothers and parents of children who are victims of sexual abuse, it's the same thing. They desperately want to be able to help their child, support their child. And more than anything, mothers want to take away their pain. And in this culture, Americans have just created this sort of superwoman persona, I guess, or something that says we should be able to do it all, including healing our children from trauma. And that is just not true. Most parents, moms, don't have the skills and tools to do that. In addition to the fact that they are trying to heal and deal with their own feelings based on the incident that perhaps happened to their child.
Absolutely. Well, another quote that I think rolls right into that is when you say, focus on what you're capable of giving, willing to give, and have the capacity to give. So when we're juggling the guilt, the shame, all the things that society is making us feel when we're either not traversing our healing journey fast enough for everybody else or trying to be supportive of our loved ones as they're going through it, how can we increase our ability to give, our capacity to give? And part two, and maybe even preceding that, is how do we know what our capacity is and are comfortable with that?
That's a really great question. Also, I'm not sure we always know what our capacity is. It's one of these things that most people, fortunately, don't have to go through this. And many people do. And so, how in the world are we supposed to know what we're capable of? One of the ways that you can discover that you are stuck and not capable of doing more is you may be experiencing anger. You may be experiencing some symptoms of depression. You may be feeling confused. You may be hearing from the outside, again, like we said, feedback that says, why aren't you doing it differently, better, or otherwise? And I think that once we become aware of what we're capable of and what we're not, that is the time to seek a professional, to seek help and get some guidance. And so we can do that through professional counseling. A lot of people lean on their spirituality. There's excellent reading and podcasts that can be done. So things like that. And I think I only answered part of your question. What was the second part?
I think it's a combination that you did.
Okay.
But I mean, I think indeed, how do we increase our capacity to be supportive of others?
Yes, it's absolutely taking care of ourselves. And women are so often inclined not to do that, right? I've got to take care of my child. I've got to take care of my family. I've got to take care of the house. I've got to take care of my job, whatever. We've really, in situations like this, have got to turn to self-care because we cannot give to others if we don't have fuel in our own tank. And it's sort of like the oxygen mask rule that you hear on an airplane when the flight attendant tells you, you've got to put it on yourself first and breathe and get oxygen before you can help somebody else. And it's exactly the same. As parents, we get so focused on, I've got to take care of my child. And it's true. And we've got to take care of ourselves and fill that tank up with healing and growth. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so often there are more than one parent. I know we focus on women a lot here, but what is dad's role? Provided he's not the abuser, obviously, but what is dad's role when a child, a daughter, has been assaulted or domestically abused in any way by a male? How can he relate to her? And then we'll talk about how she can heal from that to have a good relationship with her own father.
Your own father, yeah. This is important. I do want to make a statement about that. All this entire podcast today presumes that neither mom or dad are the abusers. So we do want to say that and make that clear, right? Having said that, men and women do typically react to trauma and, extreme situations differently. Oftentimes dads, males go straight to anger, and we get that, right? Moms get angry also. But the principle is actually no different than it is for women. Men have got to also take care of themselves, learn to process their feelings of anger. They may be feeling guilt. most helpful by way of therapy for sure. We hope that both mom and dad have really strong support systems, whether that's family, friends, their faith. So we really want to be working on dad's feelings and letting him process it in an environment away from the child. I think that's the important thing to say.
Absolutely. Thank you for that.
Sure.
And what should parents not do when they're trying to support their children?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is really difficult. You don't want to tell somebody they're doing anything wrong. And at the same time, I think there's some things that we can avoid as parents when we're supporting and loving our children. One is to probably not say, I understand what you're going through. Unless you yourself are a victim of sexual abuse or trauma, that actually isn't an accurate statement. And for a victim, their first thought is, but you didn't go through what I went through. There's no way you can understand. And they're right. So I think it's better maybe to offer statements like, I understand that you are going through something difficult. I understand that you may have a lot of feelings right now. You might be feeling sad, angry, scared. So we're just not making a blanket statement of, I understand, because you probably don't. Here's the second part, though. Maybe you do, because maybe you've been through your own trauma. Now is not the time. Now is not the time to align and bond with your child over the trauma you've experienced and the trauma they've experienced, especially based on age. Maybe if they're older, late teens into early 20s, that's a different conversation. But you're not going to be talking to a 6 to 10-year-old, for an example, about your own trauma in an effort to understand theirs. That wouldn't be appropriate.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think there is always an impetus or like a desire to want to connect to
Yeah.
whoever we're connecting with. And so it's a natural want. But while that child has gone through something that's very probably adultifying, they're not
Yes.
adults. That's not the way we don't want to trauma bond with our children. They're looking for someone that they can trust, that is a respite from what they just went through. And so the parents have
Absolutely.
I think that's great advice. Put that aside and really just be there for the child. And
Yeah, we really want to be acknowledging and telling them that we're seeing them and hearing what they're saying, right? And that line of communication is always open, and that you are still a trusted individual. This is important also, right? Oftentimes children are abused by an adult that they know and trust or thought they did. So it's important for mom and dad to still stand on that base of trust, keeping the lines of communication open. And I'm here to love you and support you and listen to you anytime.
absolutely. And you mentioned like one of the ways we can support a child if we are parents, or these sound like things we could extrapolate to any relationship. I mean, they're kind of generalized as well. And
Yes,
how we treat ourselves. Be there for
absolutely.
ourselves. Understand all the feelings that we're going to have if we experience trauma. And so as everyone's working through those feelings, what are they working towards? What is the ultimate knowing that someone is on their way of their healing journey? What are they feeling? What are they aiming for?
Yes, great. We want to be sure that everyone's functioning well in all major areas of their life. So if they're able to go to school, they're able to go to work, they're able to maintain relationships they had previous to the trauma. They are not emotionally dysregulated, or in other words, constantly crying or angry. There's nothing wrong with that, right? Especially in the beginning. But when we're looking for healing, we're looking for those things that some of those symptoms have reduced. The long-term goal, and the thing that I tell my clients is, I wish so desperately that I could take this away from you. And I wish that this experience had never happened for you or to you. And I can't do that, and nor can anyone else, because that's what a parent wants to do, right? Is take away the pain from their child. What I do say is we're going to work over time, though, so that the intensity of this event lessens. It will always be there. It's always going to be a scratch on a record, if you will. It just always will. And I think acknowledging that, learning to live aside it, but not allowing the trauma to overcome you, is one of the goals. And then again, like I said, just lowering the intensity of the trauma so that one day I can speak about my trauma. And I don't know if we're going to get to that story or not, but I can speak about my trauma today and it still stings. I'm not going to lie. It still stings, but it doesn't devastate me to the point that it used to because I've done a lot of healing.
I think we would, be open to hearing what you've experienced. It seems that it informs a lot of your understanding of others and what they go through and how you are supportive of them. So as much as you're willing to share, absolutely.
Yes. Okay. And we'll remind of the trigger warning. I'm not going to share details, certainly, but we are talking about sexual abuse. So if now's the time for somebody to turn off or turn away, it would be advised.
Thank you.
I was the victim of sexual abuse as an 8-year-old little girl. It was by a male that was unknown to me. I did go willingly with him. I think this is really important to discuss. First of all, I was a people pleaser. I was a little girl. I was taught to respect adults. Nothing wrong with that. It's still true today. I went with him willingly, but that is not consent. We have got to make this clear in our discussions around trauma and sexual abuse. A child willingly going with somebody or doing something is not consent. A child is not in a position to consent to that behavior. So I really want to drive that point home. So I went with him willingly because I was taught to respect adults and follow instructions. And that's exactly what I did. And I was taken to another location where I was abused and held for a time and then released. And I think it's important also to discuss that at that time, and keep in mind, this was even prior to stranger danger. We've come a long way in being able to discuss sexual abuse. Thankfully, at that time, it was still not discussed. It was not a thing. And so I did tell right away what had happened to me, but nothing was done about it. And that sent a message to me that said, I must not really be valuable or worthy. Nobody seems upset or to care, and nobody's mad. And that was the end of it. And we swept it under the rug. I think this is a very common experience, even still today in 2024 at this recording anyway, still a very common experience to sweep these situations under the rug. Sometimes we have cultural pieces that says we do not take our business outside of the home. B, we are private and we don't take our business outside of the home. C, we all feel so ashamed and so guilty, we aren't willing to discuss it. So those things still go on today. I just want to express how that can leave the victim feeling. So again, I really questioned my worthiness. I questioned my value. And of course, I felt guilt and shame because I thought, well, if I wouldn't have done this or wouldn't have done that, or if I wouldn't have gone with him, that wouldn't have happened. And that is not fair thinking because it is never the victim's fault. So
absolutely. And we do see it. I mean, even though there are new laws, as a victim rights attorney, I have a client right now who went through months and months with another attorney to just try and get the police to pay attention to what was going on, what had happened to her. She's an adult, articulate, able to explain what happened. But because she went to the location willingly, the police weren't as open to understanding that an assault had still occurred. And luckily, there are charges now and we're moving forward. And because of her boldness, other women have come forward about the same person. And so you never know. So it still happens. Sometimes victims are just outright not believed, even by the people who are supposed to be the experts in investigating this. And that's also terrifying. Imagine your own family doesn't believe you. You have to go, you're not feeling safe there. And then on a macro, micro, whatever level, society isn't safe anymore. The people that entrusted to really protect and serve aren't safe anymore. And so it can be devastating.
I'd like to pick up on something you just said, if it's okay. Victim blaming.
Yeah.
This can happen within a family unit as well. When parents or caregivers are unable to process and deal with their own anger, it is sometimes or does become easier to blame. This is coming from a place of pain. This is coming from a place of, I have no idea how to handle this. But victim blaming is just almost like secondary trauma, like salt to a wound, right?
Right. Right.
No victim needs to be blamed for anything they were not responsible for.
No, absolutely not. And there are studies that show like it's the after the response to people's trauma that dictates how long they're going to be in that spiral of the trauma. That can, like you said, it can add salt to the wound. It's just a constant dig at what they're already going through. And so, absolutely. But how do we remove the salt? What, I
Mm,
guess looking back for yourself now, what if there's no justice? What if it's like what you
Great
experienced?
point.
Family don't do anything. How do you yourself release that? How can you rebuild your own version and vision of yourself without getting that external validation from the system or your family or the person
Exactly.
themselves if they don't
Yep,
have any regret.
absolutely. And all three of those were my case for sure. Family didn't do anything, and probably, in fairness, didn't know what to do. I would like to say that. This would have been in 1970 or something. We weren't even talking about stranger danger yet. There was no missing persons cause for children. None of that had happened yet. So I want to speak kindly and fondly of my family to say they didn't know what to do. And that's still true today, right?
Mhm.
Then, since nothing was done, there was no justice. So there wasn't a justice piece. And there was nothing from the perpetrator or abuser. I'm not sure that I wanted there to be, but that didn't exist as well. Keeping in mind, this man was not known to me. So I carried this for many, many years. It created a lot of problems in intimate relationships for me and marriages and things. And so it wasn't until much later, which is also common for people, that I really got into some good therapy and got into the root of what had happened, what it meant for me, what it did not mean for me. That was really freeing when I was able to let go of that embarrassment, shame, and guilt, and understand that a little 8-year-old girl could do no better than she did that day when she is following the rules and sort of orders, if you will, of an adult. I did nothing wrong. The importance of coming to a place of forgiveness, which this is a whole nother podcast. It's very, very difficult, right? And it's very important because a lot of people think, well, if I forgive, then that means I make it okay that happened. That doesn't mean that at all. It is never okay. And we work to forgive to relieve ourselves of the poison that we're carrying. So
Mm.
we actually, would never want to to go back to my abuser and somehow get some remorse from him or some apology. I'm not going back to the snake that bit me to get rid of my poison. So
Wow.
I had to do the work outside and away from that, which is what was best. And in the end, to summarize that, there was a single phrase, and I hope this is really helpful for people, that allowed me to start to forgive. And the phrase is this: hurt people, comma, hurt people. Or, in other words, hurt people often hurt people. And it was the only way I could get past. I don't know anything about this man's background. I have some, ideas that are not very great. How could a man hurt a child, right? But it was that one phrase, and I thought, you know what? I bet this individual person was a very damaged, very hurt soul. And on that, I'm able to find some compassion. And from there, I'm able to move on. So that worked for me. And then I use that in my work with other survivors, to say it's not an excuse, but it's a place to find compassion.
Find compassion so that you can release it. And you
Yes.
indicated that carrying that around was a burden on even other intimate relationships for many
Yeah.
years thereafter. And so one of the biggest thing would be the rebuilding of the trust, getting the support that you need, being able to trust people again, as you said earlier, with trusting parents, if it was a trusted
Yes.
adult as a child. What are some other resiliency tools that we're trying to rebuild as we heal from this?
Well, trust is huge. It's probably the biggest one, right? We also want to realize we need to learn to trust ourselves
Hmm.
again.
Right.
Right? And for a child, depending on age, they haven't even had a chance to learn to trust themselves yet, oftentimes, right? So
Mm.
a lot of the work is not only in trusting others, but learning to trust ourselves. I work a lot with listening to our intuition. Just so often it is correct. It is us in our human experience that deny our intuition and talk ourselves out of it or whatever. And I'm still such a proponent, especially for women, of trusting our intuition. If it feels like, sounds like, smells like something is wrong, it probably is. And it's okay to act on that. We can clean that up later if we were wrong, by the way.
Right. Right.
But I
Easier
don't
to
know.
clean that up.
Yeah, right. Then again, not blaming. If you didn't use your intuition at that time and you're like, gosh, I knew it. I knew on that date that guy was trouble or, whatever it is. And I still went with him. No, we're not blaming.
Right.
We're just trying to tune back into that. So yes, building trust with others, building trust with ourselves. When we are rebuilding with trust with others, I work a lot with, and again, a nice phrase to use, trust and verify. So when people are victims of trauma, they tend not to trust at all. And we get that. But we also, I don't think, want to go through all our lives without any intimate relationships. I'm speaking emotionally now, like being close to people again. And the way we work to learn to do that is to trust. And then I'm going to check. Trust and I'm going to verify. Trust and I'm going to find out. And then do their actions match their words consistently over time? And that's how we slowly work. One tool, by the way.
Yeah.
One tool. And then I like to use journaling. I love for people to literally sit down and do a thought dump or a brain dump and literally write all their thoughts and feelings down to get it out. I hear some patients say, I don't want to do that because then it'll be so powerful. And there it is in writing. And I don't want anybody else to see it. It is intended to be private. It is intended to be confidential. It is intended not to have an audience. So therefore, it is intended not to be judged. You yourself, if you're using journaling, never have to read it again if you don't want to. But when somebody says, well, I'm afraid to see it on paper, but you're already seeing it in your mind.
Oh, yep. Yeah.
It's already there and you're carrying it in your heart. Let's get it out. Let's try to relieve some of the burden. We need an outlet. Here's what other outlets look like that are not as healthy. An unhealthy outlet looks like anger, screaming, and lashing out at people we love. Another unhealthy way that these feelings will spill over, regardless whether we want them to or not, is drinking, coping with substances, drugs, over shopping, gambling, things like that, right? To try to soothe some of the pain that we're feeling. So we can try to stuff it down, but it is no different than a boiling pot of water. And when the heat gets turned up high enough, that water boils over and the same thing happens with our emotions. And that's why it's so important to deal with them as soon as we can after a trauma and continue to deal with them until we can get them into perspective.
Absolutely. Thank you for all of that. I think I would like to know what kind of exercises, if there are any, that you use with your clients if they are going to be in a difficult situation. If they know they can plan and they know they're going to be in a difficult situation. For example, my clients going to court and having to see their abuser. What's a way that they can be prepared? Or if something unexpected happens in these encounters, how can they keep themselves calm and remembering that they are safe in their body?
That's the key right there, because what usually comes up when we face an abuser or a perpetrator is extreme feelings of unsafety because we go back to the trauma, because seeing the abuser triggers the trauma and takes us back to that place. But you said it beautifully. We've got to remember and sit. And I literally have people place both of their feet on the ground in a courtroom, feeling their bottom and their legs against the chair, breathing, closing their eyes if they need to, reminding themselves of where they are right now and that in fact they are safe, even if the abuser is only 12, 15 feet away. It's a very, very difficult thing to go through. And especially if the victim has to testify, right? Now we're sitting up in the stand in the seat and giving testimony or whatever, and we're literally facing eye to eye with the abuser. So we want to remember what we can control and what we can't. And What we can control is our testimony. What we can control is how we show up in court. What we can control is walking out of the courtroom with our head held high. We cannot control the person sitting in the defendant's chair, but there's a lot of things we can control.
Absolutely.
And we
And
always
sometimes,
want to remember, what are those, right?
absolutely. And sometimes we can't control the jury. I mean, they can be unpredictable. And so one of the things I prepare my
Absolutely.
clients for, is or a judge, if it's a family law case, you're only in front of a judge. And one of the things I prepare my clients for is that they need to be able to feel empowered by just the journey of speaking up, even if the
Absolutely.
outcome isn't this, life in prison. They may envision that they deserve, which they do
Right.
deserve.
Right.
The likelihood of that is lower often. So, yeah,
And
head
I
help.
love that. We want to be invested in the journey of taking our power back,
Right.
and
Right.
we want to try. I understand it's not easy. We want to try to be unattached to the outcome. So the investment is in the journey, the healing. I'm going to take my power back. You, defendant, don't have power over me anymore, right? I'm walking out of the courthouse. I don't know what's happening for you, but I'm walking out. I'm leaving, right? And so the investment, again, like I said, is in the journey. The attachment is not to the outcome. Would it be nice to see justice? Of course it would. But we don't want to be re-victimized at that time or re-traumatized when the court system does not follow our experience.
Yeah.
So if the court system and the judicial system doesn't support that a child was raped, and this happens,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
we've got to literally one foot in front of the other out of that courtroom. So, and again, with therapy and with support to process that, I believe.
What are some things that we can say to others to support them in that? What are some maybe affirmations that we can tell them as they go on that journey?
I think it's important to support people in their truth. So nothing will ever change a victim's truth. Not a judge, not a jury, not an attorney, not a defendant, not the outcome, not justice, not yes, justice. None of that. None of that changes the victim's story or their truth. And so constantly supporting the victim in their truth, whatever that is. We don't argue it. We don't try to play devil's advocate. We don't try to do contrary. We don't, the victim's truth is the victim's truth always. And nobody can take that away from a victim.
Mm-hmm. So we got
And,
to.
that I'm always here to listen, or can I help you find professional support? What is helpful for you? Would you like me to check in with you once a week? Those kinds of things, like help me help you. And victims don't always know what they need, right? But that's a way of empowering them again to say, okay, moving forward, what is it that you think you need? Let's be talking about what you think you need. What feels good? What feels safe? How do I love you now?
Mm, mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's beautiful.
And also not treating people differently.
Yeah, because I think, when we've been through it, we think everyone can see it on us anyway. And so we're looking for people to, see that on us, and they don't. And then if we do know about it, we cannot be the reminder of them. Yeah. Yeah.
That's excellent, Rachel. Many victims already feel dirty. They
Yep.
already feel broken. They already feel that way. So you're right. The people around them, we don't need anybody reminding us of that we are still full and perfect and beautiful just as we are. We may have changed because of what happened to us, but there is still so much intrinsic value that can never be touched or tainted. And we want others to love us in that way.
Absolutely. Well said. Well, if someone has really enjoyed this and really connected with you, how can they actually connect with you in real life?
Great question. I'm on Instagram at Sarah with an H _ Senst, SENST. My website's been up the entire podcast episode. So www.sarahsenst.com. I can be messaged through there. So those are the best ways to reach me.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for coming on today. Anything you want to leave us with?
yeah, I just want to leave everybody with, if you were to come to work with me, and I hope for all the people that love you and support you, I see you, I hear you, and this is not your fault. And I'll leave you with that.
Beautiful.
Journey through the valley of the shadow while I stand tall in the light with me. There is no sense to battle because I come in peace. I came to set myself free. And if you open your eyes, you will see my divinity.